First of all, I would like to draw the attention or remind our dear attendees about some major challenges in the rural areas. And these major challenges have been identified, among other sources, by a very interesting report written by OECD, which states that in 2016, there were 3.4 billion people living in rural areas. Only since 2007 has the urban population surpassed that of rural areas, and around 92% of the rural population is located in developing countries. Moreover, the number of rural people in developing countries is still increasing and is projected to continue growing until 2028. Conditions for rural people across the developing world are worse than for their urban counterparts when measured by almost any development indicator, from extreme poverty to child mortality and access to electricity and sanitation. The gulf is widening, contributing to large-scale migration to urban areas. However, urban areas in developing countries have limited ability to house and productively employ their own increasing populations, let alone migrants. The result is an increase in slums and urban poverty. Rural populations are being left behind by economic growth, and a high share of them live in extreme poverty. The global extreme poverty ratio, the share of the population living on less than 1.25 US dollars per day, fell from 52.5% in 1990 to 29.4% in 2008 in rural areas. However, the ratio is more than twice that of urban areas, where the share of extreme poverty fell from 20.5% to 11.6% over the same time period. Regionally, East Asia and Pacific had the highest rural poverty rate at 67.5% in 1990, but this dropped dramatically to 20.4% in 2008. Poverty is now more severe in sub-Saharan Africa, where the rate fell by only 8% over the last 2 decades. I had a chart by a graph of the world published by the World Bank stating or illustrating the fact that the share of rural population, the rural poor population, is higher than the total poor population by region. So, expressing therefore the fact that there is a concentration of poverty in rural areas compared to the rest of the other areas, probably mostly urban, of course. The rural economy characteristics are well, among others, governance gaps and informality. Gender inequalities in rural areas are pervasive. If women in rural areas had the same access to agricultural assets, including land, of course, education and markets as men, agricultural production could be increased and the number of hungry people reduced by 101 to 150 million. Common challenges to unleashing the potential of rural areas include low productivity, underinvestment in agriculture and non-farm rural employment, lack of adequate infrastructure, poor occupational safety and health and working conditions, and limited or no access to services, including financial services. Additional pressures in rural economies result from conflict, natural resource depletion, and climate change. An interesting development, if I may say, of course, concern the impact of COVID-19 on poverty. And the IFPRI declares that the pandemic's impact on food security has been, impacts have been induced primarily by falling incomes, The World Bank estimates that the global economy shrank by 5% in 2020, with the greatest burden borne by poor people. By the end of 2020, 95 million additional people, mostly in Africa south of Sahara, were estimated to be living in extreme poverty. IFPRI research estimates that the number of poor people globally is likely to increase by about 150 million people, 20% above pre-pandemic poverty levels. About the urban-rural land links, in both the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the SDGs, and the new urban agenda adopted by Habitat, United Nations member states agreed to policies that support integrated urban and territorial planning and development. They called for new inclusive approaches and enhanced synergies between urban and rural communities and spaces, an essential component of the vision of Agenda 2030 to, between brackets, leave no one behind. The reciprocal and repetitive flow of people, goods, and financial and environmental services, defining urban-rural linkages between specific rural, peri-urban, and urban locations are interdependent. The research produced by Professor Eugene Shigbu will shed an interesting light on the land dimension of the complex relations between urban and rural areas, with the aim of enhancing a balanced approach to both areas' sustainable development. However, I would like to stress that rural areas require a particular effort to upgrade their capabilities in order to be able to negotiate. I mean, a proper place in setting up the balance between rural and urban areas. Of course, this requires capacity building, together with the encouragement of bottom-up initiatives, the guarantee of equal treatment for both areas at the expense of the centralized attitudes that one can unfortunately too often notice in a number of countries. Thank you very much for your attention. I will leave the floor now to Danilo from GLTN to take over the floor. Thank you.
Yes, good evening to, I think, to most of us. And if there will be people coming from Latin America or Asia Pacific, good morning and good morning and good afternoon, or thank you, Rafik, for that introduction. So we are here to now to for the panel discussion. Specifically to understand the state of the urban-rural land linkages, particularly in developing countries. We are very lucky to have at least 5 of our resource speakers coming from different perspectives and different background, and I would like to give them. I would like to introduce them to you. So one we have here is Maria Losama, who works as advisor for the International Department of the Dutch Cadastre, or Cadastre. He also the current chair of Commission 8 on Spatial Planning of the FIG. She has a background on spatial planning, geoinformation management and application. She also works in projects related to land use planning, land policy, and geoinformation. And over time, she gained a thorough understanding of the role of land administration and geoinformation in spatial planning. At present, in the Netherlands, she was involved in land consolidation project, and she has worked internationally in various projects on land use planning, spatial data management, and land consolidation. So that's one of our panelists. We have Daniel Roberge. I think you know him. Is our previous FIG Commission 7 chair. So he works in the private sector before he joined the Quebec's government, where held successively the position of Head of Cadastral Division, Director of the Office of the Surveyor General of Quebec, and the Director of Digital Economy. He also worked as a Senior Land Administration Specialist for 4 years since 2013 with the World Bank, coordinating and supervising development projects in Europe, Africa, and Middle East. Since 2017, he worked as consultant in land management and public administration for the World Bank, FAO, and other institutions. Notably, in 2005, he participated in the founding of Federación des Geometres Francophones, and from 2011 to 2014, he also chaired the FIG Commission 7, as mentioned a while ago. We have another female in our panel, Ms. Manare Royal Mabaking. She's a Land Administration Program Coordinator and Lecturer in the Department of Land and Property Sciences at National University, NUST in Namibia. She has worked with civil society for over 9 years, supporting especially communities in urban informal settlements upgrading. And Royal has a master's degree in geoinformation science for Earth observation, specializing in land administration from University of Twente. Another expert, Rajaram Chatkuli from Nepal, is a land professional, having long experience in the civil service of Nepal. She is the previous Surveyor General of the Ministry of Land of Nepal. He has served as a Joint Secretary in Land Reform Management and Director General of Surveys. He contributed on policy issues related to slum dwellers, tenure security, land use planning, and spatial data infrastructure. Also, he has a Master's of Science degree from ITC Netherlands. Last but not the least, we have our young professional from the Young Surveyors Network. He is currently a lecturer at the Geodetic Institute of Leibniz University of Hanover, Germany, and a chartered valuation and surveyor. He received his PhD in 2019 and a Master's of Science degree in 2015 from University of Twente, with focus on in land administration. He also received an FIG Survey Review Prize at the 26th FIG Congress. Corbena's research span on real estate valuation, land governance, innovative approaches to land administration management, especially on customary lands of the Global South. Corbena is currently the chair of the FIG Young Surveyors Network. So with that introduction, allow me to provide some kind of introduction in terms of the session. So I am the Danilo Antonio from the Global Land Tool Network Secretariat. We together with FIG and our colleagues from NUST, we developed this project, and we developed this publication on the leadership of our FIG or our professional cluster leads or co-leads, Dean Dumashi and Rafik Khoury. So the GLTN recognized that secure land and natural resources rights are mandatory for mitigating critical development challenges such as poverty. Across the different continents, there's an increasing need to tackle these challenges in both urban and rural areas. And at the middle of these, land administration management strategies require a better understanding of the role they are to improve our knowledge and approach to urban-rural interdependent development. So from our point of view, protecting people's land tenure rights is an effective way of ensuring development and empowering people. And the urban-rural land linkages has a critical role to play on this. In other words, urban and rural spaces are inextricably linked economically, socially, and environmentally. Hence, the development discourse must depart from urban and rural dichotomy, but rather adopt an integrated and inclusive approach. And central to this is to understand the urban land linkages, particularly in addressing land governance and land tenure challenges. And this is what this session is all about. This is what the publication we are about to launch is also all about. So let's go back to our panelists. So the first question, and we're giving them 2 to 3 minutes to speak on their perspective, is in your opinion or in your view, what is the state of the urban-rural land linkages, especially in developing countries? And from your perspective also, what opportunities exist for the use and application of this new publication called Urban Rural Linkages Concept and Framework for Action. So let's try to bring this discussion move. I will first call Maria to speak. Maria, please.
Yes, thank you, Danny, for this very nice introduction. And as you mentioned already, I'm chairing Commission 8 within FIG, which is focusing on spatial planning and development. So I will take a spatial planning perspective in this respect in the discussion, because I assume that Daniel can complement me on the land administration part in this discussion. Well, I think the concept is very valuable to create awareness about the linkages, the land linkages between urban and rural areas and also peri-urban areas. Because I think, well, as you mentioned already, there's a complex relationship between the urban and rural land. And if you want to have any interventions in the urban areas, then it will also directly or indirectly affect rural areas and the other way around. So, well, I think it's from a planning perspective, you need to have a coherent and holistic view to address rural poverty or, well, all the other issues you mentioned, having access to services, etc. And from a planning perspective background, well, you may be aware of the push and pull factors. Unfavorable circumstances in rural areas may push people to urban areas, and on the other hand, well, favorable areas in urban areas may attract and may pull people to the urban areas. And I think by also have an eye and be aware of well, investing in rural areas to make sure that people can make a living in rural areas is also very important. Well, you see often that there's a lot of attention for urban areas, but I think we should also take a coherent perspective and be aware that we should also focus on rural and acknowledge the linkages in both spaces. So this is, well, for now, in short, I would like to keep it here. And yeah, well, I think there's much in the publication to discuss. Well, it touches upon many challenges, both in urban and rural areas and peri-urban areas. So there's much to tell. But let's first give the floor also to the other panelists, and then we can have perhaps some more extensive discussion.
Thank you, Maria, for that. Indeed, the role of spatial planning is very much clear in this urban-rural land linkages. Is encompassing and when we're discussing about the urban and rural, there are also issues around definitions and such. But I think there is some kind of consensus, especially from the experts and UN agencies, that we should now avoid distinction between urban and rural, because in reality there's none. There's always a continuum of the urban and rural kind of development or land exchanges around this, and that's where exactly I would say the advocacy of this kind of publication. Allow me to just invite our audience and participants here to write your questions or comments in the chat. So, and then we will review that right after our discussion. Now, let me give the floor to Daniel. Daniel, please.
Thank you, Danilo. So the publication launched today is a very good document, making a very good overview of the global agenda and tools developed aiming to improve land governance. The voluntary guidelines adopted in Rome in 2012 by the World Committee on Food Security during the FIG working week is focusing more on rural land. Also managed by FAO, the responsible investment in agriculture and food system also focuses on a rural area. The global land tool network driven by UN Habitat are covering urban and rural area, but maybe with more emphasis on urban. And urban-rural land linkages are reflected in the land governance assistance framework by the attention it gives to land policy matters, both for in rural and urban. But however, these global agencies have delivered very disappointing results in regards of improving land tenure security, which is the art of the urban-rural land linkages. And on the top of all these global agendas, there are the Sustainable Development Goals, in which the UN member countries are committed to give access to security near to all by 2030. Sorry. So yes, the Sustainable Development Goal, in which the UN member countries are committed to give access to security near to all by 2030. It is a huge challenge, as it is estimated that only the quarter of the world population have currently access to secure land tenure. And to reach this objective, real urban-rural land linkages are needed. Too often, we are putting in opposition urban, peri-urban, and rural, like if they were different planets. But in fact, as clearly shown and illustrated in the URL publication, they are sharing more similarities than differences in terms of development challenges. We can mention land tenure insecurity, land conflicts, land market issues, insufficient land tools, gender imbalance in favor of men in land rights, and insufficient funding for land projects, etc. Many of these challenges can be addressed through the realization of a land tenure securitization project, and with the implementation of a fundamental land tool, a land rights infrastructure, composed by a cadastre and land register. Without such national infrastructure and without knowing who owns what and where, most of these challenges are impossible to tackle. URLL is putting aside urban, peri-urban, and rural divide, and is promoting the importance of a more holistic approach in order to see the territory as a whole. Is also promoting urban-rural connection and the need for urgent action to tackle urbanization. In terms of the state of urban-rural land linkages in developing countries, as already mentioned, urban-rural land links cannot exist without a national land rights infrastructure composed with a cadastre and land register covering the whole territory. Such infrastructure support not only URLL, but also the three pillars of sustainable development. In some low-income countries, such national infrastructure exists, but in reality, in some low-income countries, such national infrastructure exists, but in reality, the implementation is so low that it cannot really support the urban-rural land linkages. In other countries, the situation is worse because there is not only one national cadastre, but many, one rural cadastre, multiple municipal urban cadastres, forest cadastres, etc. These multiple cadastres must be avoided for many reasons. The rural and urban limit is not fixed. It is not a fixed limit, but a living one, moving at the pace of urbanization. Also, implementing rural and urban cadastres is perpetuating the urban-rural divide. And the territory must be viewed as a whole, and the spatial planning must cover urban, peri-urban, and rural areas.
Yeah, just checking. Are you good? Are you good, Daniel?
Yes?
Yeah. No. Thank you. I mean, thank you for emphasizing the, the issue around land tenure security and the need for land administration infrastructure, which is obviously very relevant into the topic. And indeed, the continuum around the urban rural land linkages is very clear as there is kind of a smooth flow or continual flow of goods, services, transactions, and services from the urban, rural, and vice versa. But also the context around the geographic area where most of the issues are actually happening. In some ways, we're calling it in the peri-urban area, and I also heard something about peri-rural area. But I think that is something that we need to note. Allow me to call Royal from NUST. Royal, please.
All right, thank you, Danilo, and thank you to the previous speakers. I think one thing that we should recognize is that there has always been this understanding, at least from where I come from, that the urban and the rural are divided, and then they're also separate. But what we see through the urban and rural linkages publication is that there is this urban-rural continuum, and we should start looking at the urban and rural as two different areas that are influencing each other, especially when we come to development around space and also development in various different sectors. What we have seen, especially maybe within Southern Africa, is that there is always this separation on planning for rural areas and for urban areas. You can see this in the investment in government budgets. If we have to look at urban land reform, at least from the Namibian perspective, that has currently come to the foreground. For the past 15, 20 years, if I'm speaking from the Namibian perspective, the focus has always been on the rural, how we should support the communal land registration or customary land rights registration. And now we are seeing with the move or push of people moving to urban areas that the focus now is shifting to the urban, where we don't now have a balance of investment or focus on the urban and rural areas. What I mean by this is that we as academic institutions, if we can start moving towards supporting research that is promoting inclusion of the urban and rural continuum within our work, it can also start influencing changes in policy around urban and rural development. What I also picked up and I liked from the publication is the emphasis on seeing how we can start promoting the debate on integrated regional land use planning, where planning should happen on a regional level, where the urban and the rural areas are also supported in terms of access to infrastructure and development. I like the idea on how the urban and rural linkages also has an influence. What we are seeing currently, especially in some developing countries, is the emergence of land markets within rural areas. For Namibia, the land market focus was always on the urban. What we see now, there is this emergence of rural land markets, because as urban areas are expanding, they are starting to encroach on the rural. But then because they have always been seen as separate, we don't, at least from this side, there hasn't been a focus on what can we do to try to prevent the urban taking over the rural area. I had a discussion previously with a colleague, and there was always this debate on what is considered urban, what is considered rural. From what we came from where I come from, the urban is always defined along administrative boundaries. But then this is starting to change as people are now preferring to say move to the rural areas in order for them to, farm or at least start investing in agricultural production, and then also for residential purposes. So because we don't have a clear policy or plan on how to integrate the two, it becomes very challenging, especially with the emergence of urban land markets. And yes, like Daniel said, if countries can start looking at having a combined land administration approach or process that can focus on clear cadasters that integrates both areas, I think it can help us in addressing some of these challenges that we are facing. Basically, with the neglecting of investment, say in urban areas, and focus on that investment in rural areas, or vice versa. Because as much as we speak about urbanization and its influences on slums, it also takes away the focus that people then are starting to move back to rural areas, which is sort of a different move that has not been happening for a while. We are doing some studies here at NAST that is looking at the emergence of rural land markets, and how that is also influencing agricultural land in some of the communal areas. So with this guide, the publication, I think it will help us in promoting that there is a rural-urban continuum, and we shouldn't focus more energy on one and disadvantage the other. Thank you, Antonio. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think your emphasis around the need for to tackle the issues on urban and rural dependently is on the table now, and it's very clear whatever you do in terms of urban or rural development, it impacts the others, the other side of it. So they are interrelated. The relationship is very clear. And of course, we do have a lot of challenges around this. We still, a lot of institutions or government authorities are still addressing the issues and providing the solution separately, and in terms of policies, even institutional arrangements, even within the UN agencies. So there's really a need to actually bring a more integrated approach around this. And first thing to do is to understand the relationship between the urban and rural development. Okay, our next speaker would like to ask Rajaram from Nepal.
Thank you, Danny, and thank you for the panelists. And many of the points have been already also addressed by other panelists. I have the experience of working in Nepal, so I'll give some examples from my country. So basically, there is a very big question which is urban and which is rural, also in Nepal, because we are generally a very rural country. 21st, only urban population is only about 20%, and 1/4, about 25% of that population lives inside the capital Kathmandu Valley itself. And there are more than 200 and around 300 urban municipalities, which starts from the population of something like 8,000 also. So my point is, there is a very weak difference between the urban and rural. So that is why this urban-rural land linkages has to be very much considered, looking at the issues of the rural populations, how they can stay in their areas. And then normally rural populations, there we consider that they are agro-based, they depend upon agriculture, and the urban populations, they really depend upon the services. But when we see the mushrooming of these small townships, the differences are very narrowing. Yeah. And when we talk about this migration from rural to urban, we normally think of this different push and pull factors, and also the disasters, the natural disasters, which compels the people to move from leave the place. But very important also, the experience we have was also the man-made disaster, the conflicts due to the armed conflict in Nepal, which was a decade long. So many people, they had to leave their countryside and go to the urban areas, and many of them also overseas employment. That means the rural areas are getting vacant, the land are getting vacant, barren, agriculture production has gone down, and the Nepal, which used to be a very rice producing country and agro exporting country, now has to import the food grains also from other countries. And also the land use. due to the lack of, so there are land use and land zoning, enforcement land use and land zoning. The urban, the different centers near the urban centers, the land has been, say, really fragmented into small parcels of land, and that is a very lucrative investment for many people, because the speculations, price speculations near the peri urban setting is a very lucrative. The price goes high, so agriculture is getting down, and these small parcels of land are conversion to land is very much in place. So these all said, the important thing is that there is a very need in to enforce the land use and land zoning regulations. And also, there is no, say, lack of policies. There is a national land use policy in place which talks about these issues, and also there is a national urban development strategy which also talks about how to build the this smart cities and urban centers. At least there is a plan to have around 45 new towns to be developed, so that the urban centers are really, say, made. But the point is the enforcement, the implementation, the coordination among the different stakeholders, the different ministries, different organizations. Also, we had a federal system, that means the coordination between the central government, the federal government, the municipalities. These are all the issues. So looking at all these issues, the importance of documents like the urban rural lands concepts and frameworks in actions is very, say, important, and there is opportunity. There is opportunity for implementing these concepts, and the tools. That there are several tools already. The GLTN has tools for implementation of many of these concepts, but consolidated tool framing of a consolidated tools is also very important. I think I will stop here so that we can have a, yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rajaram. I've been to Nepal and worked with Rajaram, and for the last, I would say, 2 to 3 years, the government or the country has been doing, I would say, responsive policy frameworks. They just 2 years ago they have endorsed a national land policy. They have endorsed a fit for purpose land administration strategy for the country, and now they even set up a commission that simply deals with providing tenure security for the landless or near landless. And I think with this kind of publication, providing some kind of framework on the linkages of urban and rural land development, I think they're moving in the right direction. And thank you, Rajaram, for emphasizing the enforcement aspects. While we have a kind of policies and frameworks, it may be that always the enforcement and implementation is always a problem, especially in developing countries. Okay, let me now bring back to you our young gentleman in the panel. Kobena, all yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Danilo, and hi, everyone. So very briefly, my take on the topic is that we all realize that rural areas still account for almost half of the world's population. And however, after 2020, it's mostly expected that rural population would begin to decline, especially in countries like China and India. But the interesting thing is that in the looking at rural areas, you find the rural population and the ways of doing things over there increasingly adopting the urban behavior or becoming more and more socially urbanized. And this I see is a result of years and years of the view that the rural areas and urban areas are a sort of continuum, which the goal is to become an urban area. And so whatever a rural area is doing, they're not building upon the unique characteristics of rural areas, but then increasingly trying to undertake measures that look more like what urban areas do. Mostly because, as Royal mentioned earlier, looking at how governments behave or fund rural areas and then fund urban areas, and this actually also gets feeds into the pull and push factors, which Maria also talked about earlier. But then for my take, I would like to actually focus on education in the sense of in relation to this document that has come out, because reading the document, I was very happy, because this one of the first few times you actually see a publication that is striving to link rural areas a lot to urban areas, not to look at them as two separate points in a sort of continuum, but then two different entities that can actually work together in their characteristics to help each other. And so I think that urban and rural land use and their respective policies have to become more integrative in order to improve in the methods to not only address land tenure, but also other services such as ecosystem services that are needed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bena. That is short and sweet. And thank you for emphasizing the need for education to further understand the urban-rural linkages. It's very clear that we need more capacity development, awareness building, and we're really hoping that this urban-rural land linkages framework and action publication will provide that kind of, I would say, a reference to continue the discussion and to do more research around this, and to really understand and also to inform policymakers and bring about change in terms of, I would say, in a more integrated development. Okay, thank you very much to our panelists. I would like to look at if there are some questions posed in our Q&A. Heiko, we need your support here. We're not able to see the Q&A, right?
No, but there is already one question from Clarissa Augustinus copied into our chat. It's about our opinion about territorial development approaches for shortening food supply chains for urban areas.
Yeah, I've put it in the private chat.
Okay, thank you very much. Of course, I know Clarissa Augustinus. Good to see. Is there anyone who would like to respond to that question? So what do we think about territorial development approaches for shortening food supply chains for urban areas? Maria?
Yes, well, overall, I think I'm in favor of shortening food supply chains, especially in the agricultural sector, because I think it gives an impulse to the local economy, and it's also more sustainable to eat local produce and have shorter distances to drive, and also provide a living, what we just discussed already in the first round of relevance for urban-rural linkages, that I think we should use short food supply chains, because it's the most efficient, and both in economic ways and also most sustainable from the environmental perspective. So in that sense, I'm really, of course, you cannot fully have it operable in every place, because you're also depending on the physical circumstances, which land uses are possible in certain locations. You might have a shortage of water, or some soil may be less suitable for particular crops or types of farming. So you can never cover everything, but what you can do, you should support.
Thank you, Maria. I mean, okay, Daniel, please.
So this was one of the opportunities I identified in my answers. So if I put my FAO consultant hat, we know that the population, namely in many sub-Saharan countries, will double by 2050. So on the one hand, this means that more land will be needed for housing, and on the other hand, more land will be needed to increase the food production to feed the population. So if we want to win the war on food security, the battlefield will be in the peri-urban area where urban and rural realities meet. The good news is that the peri-urban area is where we still can properly manage the urbanization and protect the good agricultural land that will be essential to ensure the food security. So we still can plan and control the development in this area, but the governments must act now. They should first identify, delineate, and legally protect good potential agricultural land around the cities. We did it in the province of Quebec mid-1970s with the Act respecting the preservation of agricultural land and agricultural activities. Thanks to this legislation and the commission put in place to implement and manage it, we still have very good farms and forests in the periphery of cities, large ones and smaller. And still we have healthy agriculture. So responding to the question of Clarissa, this approach has also the advantage to shorten the food chain, supply chain, because there are farms around the city.
Thank you, Daniel. I think if there is there any other questions from the audience for the panelists? We can always put it in the Q&A, and we can always try to get back to that. For now, I would like to thank our resource speakers and panelists for their views and for the putting the publication live in terms of the actual operations and within their own perspective and background. Thank you very much. I will close the panel discussion now. And back to you, Rafik. Thank you.
Thank you, Danilo. Thank you, everybody. Thanks to all the panelists for their precious contributions. May I just say that obviously the discussion that has taken place right now is about food production and food policy. Of course, this is linked also to our discussion about urban relations, urban-rural relations, and this is part of it. And what we need everywhere in the world is to have structures that allow people to discuss and take the appropriate decisions, whatever they want to take the decision. So we need democracy in all at local level as well, in order to find the best solution to everybody. So now. But now it is time to get our friend and colleague Eugene to talk and present to us and to our participants and to our guests the book he has written about URLLS. Please, Eugene, can you take the floor?
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Rafik. Thank you, Danny, and all the panelists and everyone who's on this stage at the moment. A lot, but just as a matter of background, I did my PhD in territorial development, where I kind of tried to look for, the frame a rural development approach based on the territorial, the European territorial development agenda, and then looking at the local issues, so issues related to social cohesion and all that. And that's where the idea and the passion to talk about urban-rural issues, came up. And so when this project came up, and I was asked if I could, do it, with all passion and all pleasure, I was ready for it. But however, it's important that I do not in any way bias you or, impose my opinion on you. So it will be very, very important that we all try to read the document itself. It's a product of not just my idea, but actually it's been peer reviewed through several workshops and by individual experts who are globally known in this subject, and some of them are here. So a lot has been written by many, from the perspective of research, perspective of policy, civil society interests, as well as core academic intentions. But of critical recognition is actually the role the the UN Habitats has been playing in channeling the urban-rural linkages agenda. What this particular document actually does is that it actually now tries to situate the urban-rural linkages issues within the emerging realities, of the land context where we found ourselves. So the strength of the document is it has several strengths, obviously, because the term itself, urban-rural land linkages, is the first time it's being used, in this sense. But the attention, so I'm not going to go into the book trying to tell you what there are no opinions expressed in the book. What has been done is simply present, some realities through case study experiences from different countries, specifically from Germany and from Indonesia, because that's where we could get, some more practical ideas. But the work itself presents a framework on how the land perspective of the urban-rural linkages, the reality in the current situation, as well as what is expected in the future and what should be done. And it exposes the knowledge, identifies the land-related challenges that link urban and rural areas, and then how it relates to the urban-rural continuum. It also provides an understanding of the urban. Of course, when we talk about urban, we're also speaking about the peri-urban area. So it provides an understanding of what these really are. And I know in the chat, someone already asked if there is a definition. And the reality is that we try to run away from the idea of definition when we talk about urban and rural, or peri-urban. Actually, we spend more time these days trying to define peri-urban rather than the urban, and rural, because each time you make an attempt, or anyone tries to make an attempt to actually define these, special realities that we have, somehow we tend to actually dichotomize it rather than, link it. But the reality is that what makes it unique is that urban and rural areas, of course, they are different. No matter how we try to put it, you call a rural person, I call an urban person, they always try to tell you, how different they are. But what this document tries to let you know is that whereas there are differences, there are more commonalities and more similarities in terms of the global development needs, or their local development needs, as well as, the land factors. You can distinguish the urban and the rural from the perspective, and I'm giving you a rundown of what the document tries to expose. It is distinguishable through policies. Policies define urban and rural areas, legislations, administrative duties, cultures, as well as then physical boundaries where the land issues come in. But what this document tries to actually tell you is that no matter how in different countries, administrations and policies and legislations try to distinguish between urban and rural areas, you actually find out that it is actually these same tools, the policies, legislations, the administration, cultural, sociocultural perspectives and physical boundaries that actually link the two. So at the end of the day, it brings us back to why we should speak more about the linkages rather than whatever differences we might find. So you talk about rural towns, you talk about small towns, and these are because there are certain linkages, and in some places those linkages are much more pronounced. And when they are much more pronounced, we can then apply them, as a bridge to development. So the document actually talks about, in the context of balanced development or interdependent development, how will the urban leverage the advantages of the rural, and how will the rural leverage the advantages of the urban. And then at the center of it, where peri-urban areas exist, what are the relations that converge within the within the peri-urban areas that actually, especially administratively as well as in other forms, link both. Which means when we speak about equality, we talk about gender equality, we talk about all forms of equality politically, we talk about regional equalities. There is need to also discuss the issue of spatial equality. We can't talk about balanced development in a situation where the urban or the rural are being treated differently when it comes to development policies, when it comes to legislations, when it comes to how we deal with land administration issues in terms of urban-rural cadastres. And then the land component itself lies very much on the idea that when we frame land tenure security interventions, land market interventions, land conflict resolution, and cadastral and land administration infrastructure, it's important that we bring in the principle and the practice, and of course the reality, that these frameworks, wherever we try to apply them, should also be embedded within an urban-rural context where they are linked, rather than being designed based on the base of a dichotomy or division. And that's where the key of the whole discussion lies in. So the document itself promotes equal living conditions within policies, within jurisdictions. And also the idea of territorial development actually falls in here, because it kind of promotes area-based development, social cohesion, but in a situation where the differences are advantageous, they should be maintained, and where they are disadvantageous, they should be diffused. So just to end, the strength of the document is actually in the aspects of how it does identify the land-related challenges, provides an understanding of urban, peri-urban, and rural linkage issues without, being biased, as well as it answers the question of why the urban-rural land linkage itself as a framework is needed, and then relates the question, and then relates the urban land, urban-rural land linkages in the context of the global development agenda, because development happens in a local area, it doesn't happen in space. But how do you draw the global development agenda, the objectives and the various tools and interventions that are out there into, leveraging these special units, leveraging each other in a more harmonious and way. So it shows there are case studies, a case study in Germany, Bayern, a rural municipality, and Munich, a very dominant urban, urban area, and how these two have harmoniously actually coexisted in a more, in a simultaneous but more, very harmonious manner in terms of development. And so this is something you need to read about. And then it brings up the case study of, also a municipality or an area actually in a region in Indonesia, which was devastated by the tsunami when it happened some years ago. And of course, tsunamis have no boundaries; they destroy where they want to do. And that's what comes with natural disaster. And after this period, all land records were lost, and so they had to start all the way from scratch. And so the issue of urban rural was not more a critical issue for them, so that because not only that the borders had been blurred, but even the perceptions became blurred, and it was an issue of survival. So this case study presents how this can be done. And so the entire book sets the foundation for actually developing a land approach, a land intervention, or a specific land tool for simultaneously and harmoniously developing urban and rural areas in the same way, in a way that one can achieve equal balanced development, or at least aspire for a level of equal living condition. So that's what the book is about. I encourage everyone to try to go to the link. It's free, as you would know from UN Habitat and GLT, and it would always be free for use. And there is not only a framework, but also an operational steps on how this can be, applied. So thanks very much. Yeah.
Or private chat, so that Eugene can answer you if you have any clarification to seek or any comment to make. We look forward to reading your questions. Yeah, we can see, you can see that on the screen. Put them in the Q&A section, please, and we look forward to seeing them, so that we can answer you. Well, Eugene will do his best to do it. I'm sure he will be very pleased to do so. Now, Daniel Paez should be making an intervention now. Danilo, is Daniel online, or did he send any comment? Can Danilo maybe help me with that? Okay. So Daniel Paez, who's the chairman of Commission 7 of FIG. So, okay, fine. Is there anybody online who can answer me on that? No, apparently nobody. Okay, no problem. Now, so maybe Mrs. Lusma, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name in the wrong manner, madam, the chair of FIG Commission 8. Please, do you want to make any comments?
Yes, thank you, and don't feel bothered by pronouncing my name. It's a very difficult name. I will say it once. It's Lausma in Dutch, but it's a difficult way of pronunciation in international in English. Yes, of course. I first of all, I would like to express my thanks for all the work done by the professional cluster, and in specific by Eugène, because well, I think it's very valuable to have such a publication, which is, as always, as you mentioned, is available for free to enhance the debate and access to this information. Well, the topic is so relevant, I would say, also from an FIG perspective, and I think you addressed it very well. Well, perhaps a little bit from a strategic point of view, or academic point of view, but I think there's so many aspects that touch upon professional practice and are relevant, especially also for the professionals working in this field. Yeah, it's well, I'm very happy with this publication, and also grateful for all the work that you have done. And I think from a content perspective, and what we did not really discuss yet, but there's also a nice different levels in it. It depends how you interpret rural area and urban area, or in between. I think it depends very much on your daily context and of the individual. What you perceive is urban, what you perceive is rural, and this framework is capable of addressing all those different interpretations and perspectives. So yeah, well, I really would like to encourage everyone to have a look at the publication, and take the advantage of the concept of urban-rural land linkages. I have problems with the abbreviation to pronounce that. It's a tongue breaker, I would say. So yeah, I'm very much pleased, and also thanks to all the other people involved in this publication. And well, it was part of the Commission 8 work as well in the work plan. As you know, it's one of the working group topics. And this is a very nice result. And I also would like to express my thanks to GLTN, of course, and all the other organizations involved in supporting this publication.
Thank you, Mrs. Lausma. I hope I pronounce it correctly now.
Yes, excellent.
Fine. Well, okay, I'm doing some progress. Fine. Very happy about that. Thank you very much for your comments. Danilo, do you want to comment as well?
Yes, thank you, Rafik. Thank you, Eugene. There's not much to comment for now. Maybe just a reiteration of our really appreciation first to the FAG leadership for really coordinating this work and the publication, and of course the Rafik and the one that actually did a lot of coordination of this work, Daniel Paes, which unfortunately is already dawn in Australia, so he cannot join us today. And of course, Eugene, for your support on this. Again, let me reiterate the what already Eugene mentioned. The publication is already online. Let me just bring you there. I hope you can see my screen. So
Yes.
it's already in the GLTN website. You can download the publication for free. This is a pioneering work. It's a very good reference. Let's use it. Of course, it's not perfect. So we'd like to hear from you in terms of how we could improve this, and especially how do we actually act on it or implement it, not just within the premise of GLTN network, but it would be good to have that kind of partnership with individuals or institutions that have interest in this kind of work. Again, thank you very much. Back to you, Rafik.
Thank you very much, Danilo. Thank you very much, Eugene. Thank you. Many thanks to all the participants for this very interesting meeting and gathering and discussion. Thank you to all who have contributed to this debate. I think we have come to the end of this meeting, and well, I wish you all a very nice evening, and all the best to everybody. Hope to see you soon online, or maybe physically somewhere and somewhere. Well, sometime soon, hopefully. All the best to everybody. Keep well. Bye-bye.
Bye.